Welcome to episode 12 of Two Dumb White Guys. We don't have much time because it's madness. It's March. It's time to fill out a bracket.
We're mad.
We're mad about basketball, so we're going to do a Two Dumb White Guys March Madness bracket.
If you enter this bracket and you win, we get a cut.
Yes.
And you will win.
We can't guarantee that. So here's the plan. Me and Mr. Norm have chosen two regions that we have random stats that we have decided will determine who wins that round. My dog has filled out one part of the bracket, and then we're going to do who would more likely win in a fight to determine who the winner of the bracket is.
So for those of you who want to follow along as we do this, the West region is the region in which I will be providing the stats and selections. The Midwest region is the region in which Mr. Davidson will be providing the stats and selections. The East region will be selected by Scout T. Doggie,
yes,
I believe.
Scout T. Doggie is her name.
Scout T. Doggie. And the South region, we will battle to the death.
So which one do you want to start off with? Do you want to start off with the very top there and work our way through?
Let's go with Scout T. Doggie starting. Explain to us the process.
All right, for Scout T. Doggie, the way that she decides it, she's a Duke fan. I don't know why. Anytime Duke plays, she's like wrapped to the television and watching it. She cares nothing about any other basketball team. I've tried with other basketball. Nope, it's just Duke, and she is obsessed with it. So Duke automatically wins. If it's like North Carolina or a Duke rival, they automatically lose. If it's a dog, they automatically go forward. And if it's something she would bark at or not like, they automatically lose. So like birds, certain animals, they'll automatically lose. So if we start off over here in the East, Duke, of course, advances in the first round. Then the 8-9 game is VCU-UCF. My wife said that Rams look more like dogs, and so she would go with VCU because of that.
A horned dog.
Yes. Mississippi State versus Liberty. Mississippi State, of course, is the Bulldogs, so they automatically advance. Virginia Tech versus St. Louis. Virginia Tech is the Hokies, which is a turkey, and so they automatically lose.
Definite barking material.
So St. Louis moves forward.
The Billikens.
Maryland ended up winning over Belmont/Temple at the risk that at Temple, the Owls, which is our bird, might win. So Maryland moves on there. LSU versus Yale, the 3-14. Yale won because they're the Bulldogs. Then Louisville, Minnesota. That was a difficult one because Louisville's a cardinal, a bird, but Minnesota's a gopher, and she hates gophers. And so automatically we went with the bird hate more than the gopher hate. And then Michigan State versus Bradley, both humans. Michigan State moved forward. On to the second round. Of course, Duke beats VCU because my dog loves Duke. More specifically, Coach K, I think. I think it's just Coach K. Then Mississippi State versus St. Louis. Mississippi State is the Bulldogs. They advance. Maryland versus Yale. Yale's the Bulldogs. They advance. Minnesota versus Michigan State. Michigan State ends up beating Minnesota because at the end of the day, she still hates Gophers, even though they won the first round.
And they're kind of small dogs that dig in the ground.
They are. Then in the Sweet 16, so our Sweet 16 right now is Duke, Mississippi State, Yale, and Michigan State. My dog loves Duke. Duke moves forward to the Elite Eight. Yale.
You might be able to predict where this is going for this part of the bracket. But anyway, continue.
Yes. Yale versus Michigan State. The Yale Bulldogs take down the Michigan State Spartans. And so now in the championship.
Upset alert. Upset alert.
I know. A 14 seed going all the way to the Elite Eight. From the Ivy League, the Yale Bulldogs. They finally fall, though, to the Duke Blue Devils. And our first Final Four appearance is the Duke Blue Devils.
All right. So Duke starting us off with the Final Four Part 1. Moving to the West, then, from the East, we get to my portion of the bracket. I will go round by round and explain kind of the methodology, but I will go relatively quickly because, as we have mentioned, time. So, starting off with Gonzaga, the first round is determined by the total roster weight of each team. Now,
so you get the benefit if you have a really fat center that's a walk-on player sitting at the end of your bench that's the coach's nephew.
It doesn't matter. If he's 300 pounds, you've got a leg up. So, literally, I totaled the total weight of every single individual on the roster of each team, and that total weight then sparred off against the total weight of the opponent. Just a quick side note, the play-in games for the 16 and 11 seeds were determined by which team had the longest name by letter total. So, we have, to start us off, Gonzaga versus Farley Dixon, Dickinson, excuse me. The total team weight goes to Gonzaga. So the Zags move on to round 2. Syracuse versus Baylor. Just by a little over 100 pounds, Baylor tops Syracuse on the scales. And Marquette goes against Murray State. I was very sad. I was rooting for Murray State, hoping they had a 300-pound center on the end of the bench. But Ja Morant does not weigh enough. So Marquette moves on. And Florida State then takes on Vermont in the 4 versus 13 seed by a large margin. FSU tramples over Little Vermont by over or approximately 800 pounds.
Dang.
That brings us to the 6th seed versus Arizona State as the 11 seed. Arizona is a great long word to help get you through that first play-in game. Buffalo beats Arizona State by about 200 pounds. Texas Tech goes against Northern Kentucky, and Northern Kentucky wins by about 230 pounds. Oh, it's not the only one. No, it's the only one for the first round. No, Baylor was a lower seed. Baylor was a 9 seed.
Oh, that's true.
All right, so Nevada versus Florida. This was the closest of any of my rounds on any stat. By 21 pounds, Nevada beats Florida and moves on to the second round. Michigan versus Montana. Michigan outweighs Montana by a whopping 300 pounds.
So that's your first round, and a couple interesting notes there. It went pretty much chalk, which isn't that surprising considering you would think that the higher seeded team would be more athletic and thus they have more muscle, thus weighing more.
The other thing that was interesting that I didn't take into account, well, I mean, I took into account in total weight, but didn't take into account as far as when I came up with the stat, is that literally the higher teams, these more elite teams, have more people on the roster as well.
That would help too. Quick question: which team was the lightest team?
The lightest team by just, by 2 pounds. Oh no, that came in second. The lightest team was Murray State.
Murray State's
27. Oh, never mind. I'm sorry. Farley Dickinson was 2,500.
The 16 seed.
Yeah, the 16 seed was 2,500 pounds.
And who was the heaviest?
The heaviest team was actually by a relative blowout, Florida State. They had 3,800 pounds of dunking muscle.
So imagine if we got a Florida State Farley Dickinson first round in the game. That would have been entertaining.
Yeah, that would be fun to put on a seesaw.
So on to the second round. So what was your deciding factor for your second round matchups?
All right, so the second round matchup ended up going... what on earth do I have written here?
I think it was Google Trends.
Oh, that's right, Trends. That's okay. So yeah, I have it written, and I didn't know what I have. It looks like Themis. So Trends were the second round. That's right, Trends were the second round, meaning that I searched the school, and whichever school was trending higher on Google Trends at this point won. Now, for almost in fact, I think for every single matchup, if you looked at the past year of trends, the school that wins won for at least 11 of the last 12 months as well. So these are consistent.
The only one where I remember, because I was here whenever you did that.
Yes.
The first round game was the only time we saw one of the teams peak at one point, but then fall back below the other one.
Yes. And I will not 100% spoil that, but Gonzaga peaked early. So we are starting off with an upset trending significantly higher than Gonzaga, Baylor.
So Baylor's your first team of the Sweet 16.
Baylor moves on to the Sweet 16. Next up, Marquette versus Florida State. Florida State moves on by a relatively large margin there.
They trounced them.
They did. They are just blowing people out in these rounds. Of course, and this is totally going to accurately reflect how they actually perform in the tournament. So, expect Florida State blowouts along the way.
Causation is correlation. Continue.
So, moving on, we then have Buffalo versus Northern Kentucky. And sadly, the upset train for Northern Kentucky ends here. They fall to Buffalo, who is trending significantly higher.
Thanks
maybe
to
because
a lot of things being Buffalo.
I was going to say maybe thanks to the fact that there's like so many things that are Buffalo other than the school Buffalo. But
including the town it's located in.
yes, the town, the delicious wings. Anyway,
The Bills.
it's true. The large things that roam on the prairies. The next battle we have is between Nevada and Michigan. Nevada just barely snuck in by 21 pounds, and I think they were a little tired because they were trending significantly lower than Michigan.
And I was honestly surprised whenever that one happened. Whenever you typed that one in, I was like, huh. But I was like, oh, I guess it makes more sense. More people live in Michigan.
Yes, and if you actually look, so just for fun, because Michigan looked like they had such a significant lead, I typed in Jesus instead of Nevada, and Michigan still won.
Whoa! Michigan's bigger than Jesus!
So they are more searched.
Terry would be happy.
They are more searched right now than Jesus is. I think that probably says something about the state of our country. But anyway, so that brings us into the Sweet 16. We have the matchup between Baylor and Florida State and Buffalo and Michigan. And this one was determined by how many abbreviated and or hyphenated names they had on the roster. This is very important. So, Baylor started us off with a flop, with 0 hyphenated or abbreviated names on the roster. Sorry, Baylor. You lose to FSU, who starts off strong with 2 abbreviations and no hyphenations. FSU moves on. Next up, Buffalo, once again, no abbreviations or hyphenations.
Tis, tis.
And therefore, they fall by a slim margin to Michigan, who had 1 solid hyphen. So, that brings up Michigan versus FSU.
For all the marbles in Anaheim, California for the West region.
And we determined, based on total team height.
So if you stacked them on top of one another, who would be the highest?
Correct, and not on shoulders here. We have to go sole of the shoe to crown of the head.
So imagine they're kind of like cranes on top of one another.
Yes, exactly. And with the win, Florida State University by a whopping 200 inches.
Dunt, dunt, dun dun dun.
Florida State will take on Duke
Dun 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 dun
in
dun.
the Final Four, which takes us to the the Midwest region. Take it away.
All right, so far we actually have an all ACC Final Four.
Wouldn't surprise me that much.
So my first round in the Midwest, I determined the first round most of mine were based on Ken Palmieri's rankings. He's a statistician. He used to work for the National Weather Service. Now he does college basketball stats for a living. So he has a bunch of rankings, and he has ranked which teams are the luckiest, because that's what really matters in the first round. It doesn't matter how good you are, it matters how lucky you are, because it's just pretty much, you never know which one's going to get it. So for our first game, North Carolina versus Iona. North Carolina is the 117th luckiest team in the country. Iona, 245. Tar Heels move on. Then we have Washington versus Utah State. Washington wins that one as the 27th luckiest team in the country. New Mexico State versus Auburn. Auburn's 180. New Mexico State's 40. Roll Tide. The New Mexico State Aggies move on. Kansas versus Northeastern. Kansas is the 15th luckiest team in the country. They move on. Iowa State versus Ohio State. That's an interesting just name matchup there. 2 4-letter states taking on one another.
Iowa.
Yes. Then you have, so with that, Ohio State is 168th luckiest team compared to Iowa State's 295. They move forward.
Man, that is not a lucky matchup.
It is not, but here is one. Houston is the 50th luckiest team, but they run into the 3rd luckiest team in all of college basketball. The Georgia State Panthers, they're moving forward. Then you have Wofford versus Seton Hall. Wofford is 43. Seton Hall 126. Wofford moves forward. And then Kentucky versus Abilene Christian. And here we are calling our shot. Abilene Christian is the 17th most lucky team in the country. A 15 seed takes down a 2 seed. Abilene Christian moving forward.
Peace out, Kentucky.
All right, we move on to the Sweet 16, or to the round of 32, the second round. So you need to be lucky in the first round, but you know what? You need to actually be a good team. You need to play good teams in the second round.
So what's your stat?
I went with non-conference strength of schedule. Who cares about your conference? You play them every year. How willing were you willing to get off your butt and go play another team in a different part of the conference.
I feel like this is where Abilene Christian dies.
So the first matchup is North Carolina versus Washington. North Carolina had the 33rd most difficult schedule. Washington 91. North Carolina moves forward. New Mexico State, they sadly fall because Kansas had the third hardest non-conference strength of schedule. So the Jayhawks move on. Rock chalk. Then you have Georgia State versus Ohio State. You would think that Ohio State, the Buckeyes, they'd play a difficult schedule. Nope. 245 in the country.
Oh, wow.
Georgia State, the Panthers, they go out there and play people. Number 64. Yes, that's right. A 14 seed. The Georgia State Panthers in the Sweet 16.
Oh, gosh.
Then you have Woolford, the 7 seed, versus Abilene Christian. Woolford annihilates Abilene Christian. Come on. Woolford had the 7th hardest schedule in all of non-conference. Woolford moves on. Now we're to the Sweet 16. And I asked the hero of our school's basketball rich tradition this year, who sunk that winning shot to send us to the quarterfinals.
The 2-hop buzzer beater.
Yes. I asked him, what's the most important stat? And at his gullet, he said, defense. The best defensive team will win. And so our next stat in the Sweet 16, which is between North Carolina, Kansas, Georgia State, and Woolford, is most defensive efficiency. North Carolina is the 10th most defensive efficient school in all the country. Kansas is number 15.
North Carolina moves on.
North Carolina moves on. Sorry, Jayhawk fans.
I am not sorry. Go away.
And then Woolford versus Georgia State, and the Cinderella run for Georgia State finally falls. They're 137th in defensive efficiency. Woolford is 63rd. Woolford's moving on.
So Wofford in the Elite Eight.
Woolford in the Elite Eight. Calling it. So it's North Carolina versus Woolford. North Carolina versus a tiny school in South Carolina. And our last deciding factor was pace of play. Whoever has the most fast or low pace. And originally, we were going to go with the lower pace, but guess what? Both of them are in the top 100 when it comes to pace. So both of them like to push the ball fast. So we're going to go with the team that is the fastest, because I want to go fast, much like Ricky Bobby, just like the North Carolina Tar Heels, who are in the Final Four. An all ACC Final Four so far.
And that brings us to the final bracket region. And we have a whopping about 5 minutes.
So we got this. So real fast. All right. Virginia versus Gardner-Webb. Who would win in a fight? It's a Bulldog versus a Cavalier.
Cavalier wins.
Cavalier. All right. So
yeah.
VA, the Mississippi Ole Miss Rebels and the Oklahoma State Sooners.
Rebels versus Sooners. This is difficult.
Have you ever seen Old Reb?
I have not.
He's an old Southern white gentleman with a goatee and a white suit.
Oh, he loses.
He's gonna lose.
Sorry, you're too
to a
old,
Sooner.
Reb.
Yeah, all right, so Oklahoma. I need to not write there. All right. Then we have the Badgers versus the Ducks, Wisconsin versus Oregon. Who are we going to go with there?
Badgers versus Ducks. Clearly, a Badger would eat a duck for dinner.
Oh, yeah. All right. After that is Kansas State versus UC Irvine. UC Irvine is my favorite mascot, but I don't think they would win. It's the UC Irvine Anteaters. They're taking on the Wildcats of Kansas State.
Man, I wish the Anteater would defeat a Wildcat, but I don't think it's going to happen.
All right. What's our next matchup, Mr. Norman?
Our next matchup is Villanova versus St. Mary's, and I actually don't know what these...
Villanova is a Wildcat, and St. Mary's is the Gales.
What the heck is a...
It's either a bird or a wind.
I mean, a wind could be pretty strong.
It could be. Gale force winds.
So, now is it Gale, G-A-L-E, or it's like J-O-L or something? Oh.
J-A-I-L.
That's jail.
G-A-I-L.
Okay. All right, well,
I think it's the birds, though. And I think a wildcat would eat a bird.
Yeah, I think anything could probably eat a bird, unless it's like an eagle.
That's true.
All right.
Purdue, the Boilermakers versus Old Dominion, the Royals, or the Monarchs.
So we had a discussion about this. He had me look up the Boilermakers, and the Boilermaker from Purdue looks like someone you would not want to run into a dark alley, and he has a sledgehammer. I think that the Royals are just too blue-blooded. They're going to get squished.
So we're going to go with Purdue, yes. The Purdue mascot is on my top 2 list of nightmares of most likely to kill you. The other one, the Clemson Tiger. The Clemson Tiger is straight out of nightmares.
It's also because he's an Alabama fan.
No.
They have given him nightmares.
I have thought of I have had nightmares of the Clemson Tiger way before that. Then we have the Cincinnati Bearcats versus the Iowa Hawkeyes.
And I'm going Bearcat because
I would go
we
Bearcat
looked
too.
them up and they have prehensile tails.
All right, and then the Tennessee Volunteers versus the Colgate Raiders. Do you like Daniel Boone in this situation versus a Pirate?
I'm still going Pirates. I'm going Raiders.
So we got two 15 seeds winning?
I can't help it. A Raider, they can just pot shot you from their ship, man.
Two 15 seeds advancing. All right, now we're on to the Cavaliers versus the Oklahoma Sooners.
Man, a Cavalier versus a Sooner is difficult, but a Cavalier has a weapon. A Sooner is in his wagon trying to get him some land. So I think we're going Cavaliers.
So Virginia advances. All right, the Wisconsin Badgers versus the Kansas State Wildcats.
Ooh, Badger versus a Wildcat.
Badger's a bad rammer jammer.
Is it a honey badger or just badger?
I think it's just a badger.
Oh, dang it. Badger. I'm going Badger. Also look up Badger.
Mushroom.
Yes, exactly.
Mushroom. The Wisconsin Badgers advance. The Villanova Wildcats versus the Purdue Boilermakers.
Man, okay, I know that the Boilermaker is terrifying, but I'm just picturing this Wildcat using his
But he has
claws.
a sledgehammer.
Yeah, but exactly, like how fast can you get a sledgehammer around to hit the Wildcat that is running amok and tearing your shins
He's
up?
also a human being.
Well, yeah, but he only has a sledgehammer. We're going with the mascot strictly. It's up to you. I mean, what do you think?
Hey, you know what? You want Villanova? We can go Villanova.
I'm going. I like creatures more than I like.
All right. What about the Cincinnati Bearcats versus the Colgate Raiders?
Oh man, I want so badly for a Bearcat to make it just because I looked up Bearcat and found out they have a prehensile tail. But if you have a Raider versus a Bearcat, the whole rule about them being able to stay on a boat and shoot something and not get injured probably still holds true if they're fighting a Bearcat.
So Colgate advances. We have another 15 seed we have a 15 seed going to the Sweet 16. Upset Central. All right. Cavalier versus Badger.
Cavalier.
I hate it. Our beloved Hufflepuff mascot falls finally. Villanova versus Colgate. A Wildcat versus a Raider.
Oh, dang it. This is gonna. Are we going all the way to the Final Four? A Raider versus just about any animal.
Colgate in the Sweet 16. All right, so we have the Colgate Raiders versus the Virginia Cavaliers. Luckily for us, I think the organization and the wherewithal of a Raider would finally take down, or of a Cavalier would finally take down a Raider.
I was going to say, I think the Raiders will finally lose here. Just wait till we correctly call this.
And we have an All-ACC Sweet 16, or Final Four.
All right, so we have vastly overvalued the conference. And, or maybe not. We'll see.
All right, so our next deciding factor was what, Mr. Norman?
What is the closest team to our current location? Meaning, we are going to look at our Final Four of Duke, FSU, North Carolina, and Virginia, and see who is the closest school to Portageville, Missouri. And on one side of the Final Four, Virginia versus North Carolina, the win goes to...
North Carolina is 728 miles away. Virginia is 759 miles away.
Oh my goodness, the close win.
The UNC Tar Heels are in the championship game.
And on the other half, we have Duke Blue Devils versus the Florida State Seminoles. And the distance is...
I don't have the distance written down, but I remember looking it up yesterday. It was about a 200-mile advantage. Oh, you have it.
Duke is 728 miles away. Florida State is 526. FSU versus UNC for the championship. And the winner will be decided in the most logical way possible. A coin flip.
On one side, I have, this is from the Gold Strike Casino in Tunica, Missouri, or not Missouri, Mississippi, that my old roommate once brought home. On one side is Gold Strike. On the other side is a $1 So, which side's going to be which? I guess UNC's the 1 seed, so they're going to be the number 1. Florida State will be tails.
The Gold Strike.
The Gold Strike. Let's see who wins.
You just got to let it fall on the ground so we can hear the clink.
Florida State!
FSU with the win!
Dun, 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 dun!
And there you have it. We have the unfailing, most accurate bracket in the nation. You can take that to the bank as long as you don't sue us when you lose all your money. So, we have our final bracket. If you would like to use this, feel free. It is 100% accurate. We're calling every game.
Yep. So, Florida State National Championship, Florida State versus UNC in the title game. Final Four, Duke, Florida State, Virginia, and North Carolina.
And with that, we have had our speed round podcast. Look out for the next one dropping next Monday.
During spring break.
During spring break. And keep up, of course, to see how accurate we really are.
But until next time, my name's been Paul Davidson.
And my name is, and Lord willing will be, Scott Norman.
And we've been 2
Dumb White Guys.